going to look at the same exercises but in different positions. So we're going to do quite a few things, exercises standing, and then repeat them on the floor, and notice how they feel very different, and you sort of almost recruit different muscles just from the different body position. I also want you to think today about where you're moving from. So let's start with our feet hip width apart, nice and parallel with those feet. Clasp your fingers and pull your hands apart as if you're trying to get one elbow to that side of the room and the other elbow to that side of the room. So you're creating a bit of tension between your hands. Then place the hands behind the head, and I'm going to turn slightly sideways. I'm going to turn completely sideways actually. Keep lengthening your elbows sideways, and in doing so, try and think about the shoulder blades sliding away from each other, rather than because you've got your arms, your elbows wide, you're squeezing those shoulder blades together. Lengthen them away. Grow tall in your lengthening in your spine by cupping the base of your skull with your hands, lifting that up, and then sending the tailbone down. Thinking about where the weight is through your feet. So maybe have a little rock forwards and backwards. Find that middle position between big toe joint, little toe joint and the heel. I'm going to go this way. And then take some breathing. So maybe close your eyes, observe where the breath is going. So hopefully expanding around the rib cage. So 2 sets of gills at the front, 2 sets of gills at the back. And when you breathe out, grow taller, activate that pelvic floor. And then one more thing, to really set the core, I'm going to stay this side actually, we're going to bring those elbows forwards into your periphery vision. And as you do that, feel like the shoulder blade is sliding around your rib cage wall. Elbows are coming forwards into your periphery vision, as I said, and you're drawing the shoulder blades down and they sort of curve around. And it's like you're switching on your side armpit seam. That's this bit here, that's the bit we want to focus on. And then from there, I want you to think about where we're moving from as we take a chest pop. So we're lifting the front of the chest, but basically we're folding over the bra strap line at the back. And if I just show you with this dowel, we're here. And so from the side, you can't quite see it that way, actually I'll go this way, face this way. So I'm folding over that. From the side, there's no change in my hips, my weight, it's just that upper body. So there, the crease is coming from there, from that bra strap area. But we're in this position, so we're pushing the head into the hands, we're bringing the elbows forwards, we're lifting the ribs off of the hips, and then we're going up and over and returning. So if I go a little bit closer to the camera, there's no change. So here actually, no change in the pelvis, no change in the gap between your chin and your chest. Lifting up and then coming forwards. Lifting up and coming forwards. And now let's take that similar sort of crease. It will feel a little bit different, but fold forwards. Essentially, this then becomes an abdominal curl. Folding forwards over those ribs at the front and then coming upright. Folding over. And again, no change in the pelvis. If anything, I'm working really hard to make that crease happen from here. And then let's have one of each. So you're going up and back, and through a neutral position, a lovely neutral position, and then folding forwards. Through the centre, up and back, and forwards. Notice the weight on your feet. Don't let it change. It should stay equal, front and back, all the way through that movement. Perfect. We're just going to take a little mini hip hinge. And for this, again, I want you to be braced in your torso, exactly as we just did, but also spread the thumbs and the fingers far apart, get your hands span as much as you can, like you're doing your piano scales. Thumbs are on the ribs, little fingers on the hips, feet hip width apart, everything in that same position we were just in. Try not to tuck the elbows in, push the elbows forwards, and then we're sending the bottom back and coming upright. So from the side, absolutely no change in the torso. From the top of the head to the sacrum, to the base of the spine, there hasn't been a change there at all. Not just the shape of the spine, the whole of that upper body. The hinge, the movement is happening from here, but now notice the difference in the weight through the feet. Once you've done a few of those, take one hand away, so keep one hand there in your piano scales position, and put the other hand in the nape of your neck. And again, just checking that it doesn't change. So if you lift the chin, you're going to feel that straight away. If you let the head lower too much, you're also going to feel that change in the neck. Then holding that position there, maybe pop the hands back on the front and tapping the feet, lifting the whole of the front of the foot up. That's basically your test that your weight is back on your heels and you're quite comfortable there. Just staying there, building the endurance, building the tolerance of the muscles holding the spine in that position. Great, so that was all very fixed. Now let's get mobilising. So, rolling the shoulders around. So think about my little cap sleeve on my t-shirt here. This is the movement that we're focusing on. And as we're doing that movement, apart from the arms joining in because they're attached to your shoulders, the rest of the body is staying fairly still. And let's go forwards. And this is, so everything we've done so far, we're going to repeat on the floor. All four of those movements actually, all four movements. So rolling the shoulders round. Great, let's pop the hands on the shoulders. Now shift the rib cage. This will be quite different. So the rib cage again attached to more parts of the body than the arms are attached only to the shoulder. So more parts of the body will join in as you start to try and move this. And what I've noticed in class this week as we've been doing this movement is that a lot of people cheat this a little bit and they pretty much stay in the same place. Or they might pitch forwards and rounded with the upper back in order to push the rib cage back and then just open up the chest. What I'm after you doing is really shifting that weight in the feet. So I'm shifting back to my heels because I'm pushing the ribs back. And then I'm opening out the arms, opening out the elbows, lifting the chest, but projecting the rib cage forward, which takes my weight onto the balls of my feet. So there's quite a big movement forwards and backwards as we do this. So if you find your weight is just staying even on your feet, you're not doing this big enough. So let's finish off this movement, opening up the arms, even bigger now. We're trying to mobilise, free up this rib cage a little bit. So some of these, I sometimes call these butterfly arms if you want to add a little circle on the end. Then try this, hands are out straight, again shifting, rib cage only, forwards and backwards. And because it's quite difficult to move my rib cage in space, I'm again shifting the weight forwards and backwards onto my heels. And there's a sense of connection or a sense of awareness at this sort of front of your armpit, that area there, and that's going to come in handy when we're lying on the floor. Brilliant. Let's go for some spine movement. So I'm just going to go start on a diagonal. So we're lifting up, lifting the chest up, looking up, sticking the bottom out, finding your legs with your hands, fingertips in, elbows out to the side, and then unravel the spine all the way down, and then lift all the way back up. So this is a chest lift to go down and a back lift, an upper back lift leads the way. The head finishes off both halves of this movement. So if you think of it in two halves, first half is going down, relaxing the head down, second half is coming back up. Try and send the bottom back, relax and roll up. That's one thing actually that we're not going to repeat on the floor. That would be quite difficult. We're just trying to mobilise the body. But the point of this one, in mobilising the body, so when we do that with our spine, and if you're familiar with my classes, you'll be used to that movement by now. Sometimes we go the other way, or we do a sort of a reverse ripple or whatever. We're mobilising the spine on a sort of front to back plane. Now I want you to think about mobilising the side seam of your body. So we're just going to sway from side to side. And we're looking for that same sort of fluidity that we just had. So you can either lead with your shoulder, or I feel like I'm leading with my ribs actually. Ribs are shifting and I'm just stepping over to one side. Or you can reach the arm, because I'm leading with my shoulder, my ribs, thinking about this side seam. Elbow tends to lift up before you get over to the other side. And you leave the head, you sort of leave the head behind. Yeah. Great. And relax. Wonderful. So mobilising everything. Let's take one more movement, which we are going to use when we're on the floor. So we're going to take I'm taking a big sort of step to get into this big capital X, looking up to the ceiling, and then I'm going to bring my feet and knees together, and I'm going to curl into a really tight ball. So from the side, I've got my elbows, my forearms on my legs, or you could have your chin on your chest, but everything is really tucked in. And then I'm going to stretch out, step to come out, step to come in. And it doesn't have to be perfectly formed. Just try and step out with a different leg each time, maybe. So step, that was with my right, this one's going to be with my left, and coming in. But again, it's that change in body shape, complete change in body shape, which we are going to do on the floor. One more of those. Wonderful. Okay, great. Let's come back to a bracing position with the spine. Hands back on the torso, checking that it's all staying absolutely still. We're transferring the weight, and I'm just going to bring my feet actually to the edge of my mat. My big toes to the edge of my mat. Feet are sort of slightly wider than hip width apart, maybe, but not together. Transferring the weight over to one side, lifting the heel, lifting the knee into a really nice knee fold. Putting that foot down, I'm just feeling with my toes for the edge of the mat. Transfer to the other side. Lift. Foot down and lift. I don't mind if you look down so that you're making sure you're accurate. Then set yourself in the middle and then over to one leg. So concentrate here. So we're using the hands here initially. This is to think about that rod from your rib cage to your hips. It's really strong there. When you're bracing in your torso and you don't want anything to change, this is the fixing of the rib cage, drawing down to the hips. It's like there's a rod there, as I just said. You can't bend it. There's no bending. It's solid. Also think about your tissue box. So the four corners of your tissue box, the shoulders and the hips, are staying absolutely square, pristine condition. They're not in the reduced basket in Waitrose. They haven't got damaged in transit, so they're half price. The tissue box is absolutely pristine, and everything is facing forwards, facing to your front. So what sometimes happens is you might twist back slightly with the hip, which will then change everything else. It will just change all your alignment with everything. Moving on as well, so move your hands around a little bit. Maybe put your hands to the sides of your torso. And you're checking this time for no hitching in the waist, which will also accompany maybe a little bit of twisting. So everything, both sides of the waist are staying equally weighted. So again, thumbs on the ribs, little fingers on the hips, no change. The last thing to think about, and I was going to turn to the side, but it also applies to the front, is this knee. Directly opposite your hip, not your pubic bone. Don't let it come across. It's directly opposite your hip, and it is also from the side at a beautiful 90 degrees, and then your lower back should stay in its natural curves. So we're lifting, we're lowering, we're lifting and lowering. Perfect. Just we're here, transferring the weight from one side to the other, lifting, keeping the torso square, being really accurate with the leg position, making sure the lower back didn't change, nothing changed. Then we're going to look at some oblique twists, which we're going to do on the floor. Again, we're going to repeat that last exercise on the floor. So taking one arm out to the side, in fact, just have a look at this. So one arm is out to the side. Imagine my body is creating the other part of a 90-degree angle. So if the body was here and this arm is out to the side, there's a 90-degree angle. Let's take it here. We're going to place that hand to the back, the other hand to the back, and I'm going to reach up and over towards the 45-degree angle. And the best way to do this is to actually be close to a wall. Now my heels are about 6 inches away from the wall. I'm softly bending my knees and I'm leaning back into the wall, so it's quite comfortable. My hips are on the wall, my shoulders are on the wall, my back is in its natural curves. Arm out to the side, hand at the back of the head, and then from here I'm going to take that elbow across and forwards to that 45-degree angle, so sort of reaching towards the front corner and then coming back upright. My shoulder of this arm here, that shoulder is staying absolutely glued to the wall. The other shoulder is coming off. Both hips are staying glued to the wall as well. So reaching over. So when I'm doing this against the wall, or even when you're doing it freestanding, I'll do some freestanding, so same side. So standing with the feet hip width apart. So you can see I'm really sideways on. Keeping that back arm nice and straight. I'm reaching over to the corner. Where you're going to feel it, hopefully when you're standing, is around that top quarter, around your shoulder blade, on the side that's stretching forwards and over to the corner. Let's try some on the other side. So if you're against the wall, great. If you're freestanding, imagine you're against the wall. So keeping hips and that shoulder and that arm that's out to the side, keeping them absolutely still. So it's a strong stretch around the shoulder blade. I'm going to come back to freestanding from here. So this is me sideways on. So it's me going over towards the corner. This is where I feel it most. Watch that your hips don't follow you. That's the hips following you. Hips are staying absolutely still, reaching across. Try not to, if I go this way, try not to turn completely towards this arm. So I'm going up and over to the corner as opposed to just rolling round and twisting. Great, okay, feeling that, noticing how that feels. Brilliant, let's bring our feet. I'm going to come into a first position. So we're going to have the feet quite wide. You're going, not too wide, but nice and parallel. Where they need to be is the point where you can lift your heels up, you can turn your legs out in your hip socket, and you come into a natural turned out position. So the heels come together, the backs of the legs come together, and then we're going to lift the heels up and release. Today I've got bare feet, and on my yoga mat it really is quite sticky, but try and bear with it if you can. If you're on carpet or you've got socks on, it will be a little bit more comfortable. So just releasing back to parallel, turning out, trying to move both legs at the same time, and trying to move them from the hip. I'm going to do one more, and this time I'm going to stay there and have a little look down. So I was a little bit wonky. My excuse is that the mat is quite sticky. So make sure your feet are evenly turned out. If you can't get your heels together, that doesn't matter, but turn the legs out all the way. Try and squeeze them together so that you're losing any daylight between them, and hopefully already you should start to be feeling some pelvic floor work, some work in the gluteal fold, your sit bones, and you're lifting the pelvic floor, and just in your turnout muscles in general, and the muscles at the tops of the thighs. We're going to try and keep the heels together. If it's not your heels, it needs to be your calves or just your lower leg in general. Keep the heels together and take a very small rise and a lower. Watch as you do this, and I have a very much tendency to do this. If you're quite curved in your lower back, you can go into gymnast mode, as I call it. Send the tailbone down. Open up the hips. Lengthen the spine, basically. So lifting and lowering. So hopefully you're feeling some activation around that pelvic floor area, tops of the thighs. Good, and then we're lifting up and we're going to stay up. Now we're going to bend the knees. The knees are going over the toes, and then you're straightening the legs. Notice the feeling, the different feeling. When you bend your knees, pelvic floor area relaxes a little bit. When you straighten the legs, you can feel it all coming back in. Low, keep the heels low on the floor if you need to, but if you can, keep those heels off. Think about the weight through your toes, equally weighted big toe joint and little toe joint. Lowering and really upright with the body. There hasn't been no change in my torso at all. Knees are going completely over the toes, so there's no issues there with the knees. It's just hard work. Strong in the legs. Good, we're just going to finish off this little section. Really, let's bend the knees to start with, and then really quite fast, 10 straightening of your legs. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and lower. And that should have made you feel some work there. Perfect. We're going to stay in this turned out position because it really keeps the hips nice and still. I'm going to turn sideways on. Bringing the arms forwards, and we're taking a bow and arrow movement. Stretching one arm forwards, reaching the other arm back. As that hand goes underneath your chin or across your chest, out of your periphery vision, extend, follow it with your head, look behind you, extend back and sweep round. And I just notice in the monitor then, even though I'm trying to keep my hips still, quite naturally those hips will want to rotate. So with these leggings, this is me square to the side, hips are level. So you can't see that back leg. If I even let that go a tiny little bit, well, it's quite a bit actually, but you can see that back leg starting to swing round. So the movement should all be from the waist upwards. So reaching one arm forwards is as important as pulling this elbow back, which pulls that shoulder back. As the hand goes underneath the chin, extend the arms. Now I'm going to actively push that hip forwards, that's better, and sweep round, and to the other side. So I'm pushing my right hip forwards now, pulling the right elbow back, reaching the left arm forwards. Look behind you, sweep round. I'm just brushing my wall slightly. Look behind you and come back. So from the front, keep going if you can. From the front, if you can see yourself in the mirror, there's no leaning. My spine is staying completely upright. My feet are staying equally weighted. Pull the shoulder back. So what tends to happen a little bit sometimes is that we lean over. Really upright. Whoops. It's very telling actually doing it facing forwards. Stretch the arm out behind and then sweep it round. One more each side. Elbow turning. I can feel myself leaning away from it. So I could feel my weight had adjusted then. Just a tiny amount. Try not to have the hands too close together. Shoulder width apart. Reaching. Keep that weight equal. Keep pushing that hip forwards. Stretch back and sweep it round and have a little relax. Fantastic. Okay, we are going to come down to the floor and we're going to repeat all of those exercises and add a couple more. Let's come down to all fours from a wide-legged roll down. The chin onto the chest, legs nice and straight. Unravel the spine, soften the knees, walk out, hands underneath your shoulders, lower both knees to the mat, with control. Great job. Okay, from all fours. So the first thing that we're going to repeat, the first exercise we're going to repeat is those pesky shoulder rolls. And this is tough. Spreading fingers and thumbs far apart, hands underneath your shoulders, knees underneath your hips, your spine in its natural curves. Think about the circle that you're making with that cap sleeve of my shoulder. That's the area, the focal point for your circle. And then what happens, which is the reason we did this when we were standing up, trying to shift the rib cage forwards and backwards, and the reason I tried to get your height and your awareness of this armpit crease, if you like, is the rib cage drops down towards the floor. It drops down and then you lift it back into a neutral position. So what I've seen a little bit in class this week is dropping down is sort of happening, but there's actually a bit too much going on in the rounded part, a bit too much lift in that upper back. Or some people, it's only the lift happening and not the drop down. Try and change direction if you can. So now this feels completely different. It feels like a different exercise, to be fair, because your arms have to be grounded. You're not free falling, if you like, with it. There's this restriction, which makes it a more difficult exercise, but also a more intense exercise. Amazing for your shoulder strength, just for getting blood flow to that whole area and your general awareness. Okay, from here, we're going to take an exercise where we separate upper body and lower body, a little bit like the bow and arrow. So bring your feet and knees together, and from your all fours position, we're going to extend one leg out. Extend the camera leg out just so that you can see what's going on, and lift that leg up. Come back to thinking about your tissue box. Shoulders, both hips, absolutely parallel, pristine condition, flat to the floor if you were to lie flat on the floor. Keep that leg out straight behind you, keep the foot pointed. So your hips, think about just your hips now. At the moment they're horizontal, level with each other, and then you're going to stack them. So you're lifting, so one hip is up above the other hip. Try and keep your shoulders level. You will feel the same side hand, that front hand will want to unweight a little bit, and it will slightly. And especially if you get a really good rotation in that pelvis. And that's absolutely fine, allow that to happen, but try and stay looking down once you've seen what the movement is. So this is amazing for your hip strength, really articulating the spine on a rotational plane. Where are we moving from? We're moving around that waist. Two more. Hold the next one with the hips up, the hips stacked. Flex that foot. So notice that the leg is turned out in this position. Lower the leg to the floor, keeping the foot flexed. So I'm resting on the inside of that leg. Then I'm going to unweight that front hand, and now I'm going to stack my shoulders one on top of the other, and actually do that as you sweep that arm past and up to the ceiling. Hold it here for a balance. So hips are stacked and shoulders are stacked. You might want to relax that foot that's on the floor. Actually, that feels a bit nicer for me. And I'm driving my hips forwards a little bit. Now reach that arm up and over, above your head, in front of your head, and look into the palm of your hand. Just twiddle your fingers so that you'll know that that's where you're looking, and think of that side armpit seam especially. Push it up to the ceiling. Now keep reaching that arm forwards. Feel the shoulder, the rib cage, the waist, the hips. Unravel back to neutral and bring that leg in. And I'm going to twiddle round to the other side. You could stay the same side, or you could do it this way. It's just easier to have a little look at what's going on the end bit. So feet and knees together so that you're a little bit more balanced. Hands shoulder width apart, spread those fingers and thumbs. Extend the leg, lift the leg. Absolutely no change to that tissue box whatsoever. Your spine is in neutral, head is in the correct position. Keep the foot pointed, keep the leg nice and straight. Stack the hips, one on top of the other. Notice, so this is my tighter hip on this side. Notice, does it feel different? Does it feel tighter? It definitely does for me. I feel like I'm not getting my hips stacked as well. But it's getting there. So just being aware of the differences and trying to work through them is all we need. Doing a couple of extra, not in this sort of exercise, but if you're stretching, stretch a little bit longer on your tighter side. Do a couple of extra reps on your weaker side. I'm going to do 2 more. Lifting up, and hips are horizontal, hips are vertical. I'm going to flex that foot, I'm going to lower the leg to the floor and then release that front hand. So I'm now stacking my shoulders as I brush my hand past and reach up to the ceiling, looking up to the ceiling. And then stretching across, looking into the palm of that hand, twiddling the fingers, thinking of pushing that side armpit seam up to the ceiling, really stretching sideways and driving my hips forwards actually as well. Good, and then keep reaching towards the floor. Feel the shoulder, the rib cage, the waist, the hips unravel and coming back onto all fours. Great job. Give your hands a good old twiddle. Fingers a twiddle, do some sea anemones. So whenever you're on all fours and those wrists start to get a little bit uncomfortable, please try and work through them. Okay, we're coming down to lie on our backs for our next repeat. So, lying on your backs for a straight bridge. So maybe getting there by hands underneath the backs of the knees, rolling all the way down. So we're looking after a dog called Frank at the moment, and he's wanting to join in with the class. He's having a little bit of a whine outside, but I daren't let him in. Okay, so feet nice and close to your hips, nice and relaxed, spine in its natural curves. So the thing that we're going to repeat a couple of things here, but the first thing is quite unusual in that we're going to take a straight bridge, and what I want you to think about is where you're moving from and which parts of your body are changing. So pushing down through the feet, switching on those buttocks, lifting the hips up, sending the knees forwards, connecting the rib cage to the hips, that should already be in place, and then lowering with resistance. So apart from the head, ignore the head because the head and neck are staying in a slightly odd position because they're on the floor, but from your collarbone to your pubic bone, think about your spine maintaining its natural curves all the way down. The rib cage is connected, natural curves are there, so we're not articulating through the spine at all. Resist down so that you stay switched on. Pushing down through the feet, sending the knees away. One more. So it's basically a hip hinge, but we're just opening up the hips. We're hinging at the hip by opening it up in a different way to how we did when we were standing. Let's stay up at the top this time. Now, as we did when we were standing, we went into first position, ballet first position. So lift your heels slightly, bring your heels together, your toes stay apart, your knees go over your toes. From this position, generally, you should be able to get those hips up a little bit higher. So really opening up at the front of the hips, pubic bone as high as you can. Check that the ribs are relaxed, connected, that rod is there. Same things, coming back again and again, same cues all the way through. This time we're going to squeeze the heels together at the same time as switching on at your gluteal fold, or your sit bones, and taking a little pulse for at least 10. So every time I switch on at the gluteal fold, I'm squeezing my heels together as well, and trying to just get those hips up a tiny bit more. Pelvic floor is already lifted. There was nearly a rhyme there, but didn't quite make it. I haven't been counting. I'm going to do another 5 actually. Knees over the toes, hips as high as you can, shoulders, collarbone, head and neck relaxed. Well done if you've done those extra few. Lift the heels up, come back to a parallel position with the feet, normal position, take the arms up and over to the floor behind you. This time we're going to reverse peel down through the spine. It feels like you're hanging on to a branch as you unravel through that spine and then bring the arms up and over. Great, okay. Next up is our standing work, when we had our hands behind our head. So let's replicate that by straightening out the legs and flexing the feet. So it's the same as if we were standing. Try and have the soles of your feet nice and flat. No curling around when your feet are relaxed. Nice straight legs, so my heels actually come off the floor, so I've got quite big calf muscles. Let's start with those elbows out to the side. Just start quite relaxed and then draw the elbows forwards and into your periphery vision. Feel that armpit hug happening. Feel the shoulder blades sliding down and around the rib cage wall. Now we're in the perfect position once you're braced in your center, the whole of the torso. So rib cage is connected, that rod is in place, lower back curve is in place. Now we're in the perfect position to take our abdominal curls, which is what we did when we were standing. But now this feels very different, much harder. So notice the gap between my chin and my chest isn't changing. My arms, when they're both there, are doing all the work of lifting my head. My head and neck are relaxed. I can wiggle my head around. There's no tension in my neck. If your neck starts to hurt, you're definitely doing something wrong. There's no change in my lower tummy. There's no pushing up. There's no change in my lower back. There's no pushing down. There's no change in the pelvis. I'm clearing my shoulder blades by 1 centimetre, 1 fingertip. That's it. You don't need to come up any higher. And then lowering. All of that is going on. My shins are actually starting to ache a little bit because I'm working so hard to keep my feet in the correct position, to keep my legs nice and straight, no change in the pelvis. Hopefully you're feeling some love, and especially around those ribs at the front, because that's the part where we're hinging from. Okay, we're adding on to this. Again, I want beautiful accuracy, the same, I'm going to give my legs a bit of a rest actually. Beautiful accuracy as we did when we were standing for our knee folds. So as you're coming up for your abdominal curl, at the same time, lift one leg into a knee fold. Point that foot, the knee is directly above the hip. You've come up into your abdominal curl. As I'm straightening that leg, I'm lowering my upper body at the same time, flexing that foot, almost pushing that leg away. Lowering but not relaxing. You can't get down to the floor and think, oh, I've done one of those, that was excellent. There's no time to relax. Stay switched on all the time. Point that foot as you lift up. You're coming straight up. We're not trying to twist at all. Both hips staying level. The leg that stays on the floor, nice and straight, push that leg into the floor a little bit to help you keep your pelvis nice and level. Notice that the shape of your lower back hasn't changed. The knee is directly above the hip. Shape of your tummy hasn't changed. You're not pushing up. You're not overstraining. What I've noticed in class this week is that suddenly everyone's gone a little bit lower again on those abdominal curls. Clear those shoulder blades. Clear the tip of your shoulder blade by 1 centimetre. That's all it is, but make sure you're working hard throughout the movement. Let's do 4 more if you can. If you wanted to set your breathing with this, I never talk about breathing, I'm too busy talking, but breath out maybe on the way up, breath in on the way down. But whatever you're doing with the breathing, try not to hold the breath. That was my 4th one. And try not to hold the breath. What was the other thing? I don't know. Don't create any tension by adding your breathing. Okay, I'll let my legs relax again. A little bit, having a bit of a cheat today. I'm just going to show you this next exercise, which is the one we did again standing for our obliques. I'm just going to show you in a slightly different angle so that you can understand where I'm coming from. My legs should be straight, but there isn't room. So imagine my legs are straight. One arm is out to the side, the back of the hand is there. This is creating, so there's my 90 degree being created by this arm. I'm going to take the other hand to the back of my head, and then I'm lifting up and over on the 45 degree angle. So I'm lifting my elbow up towards where the ceiling and the wall meet, and then I'm coming back down. Your hip on the same side will want to do this. It will want to follow you. Don't let that happen. I'm just going to do a couple on the other side. So thinking about rolling across that shoulder and then lifting up. It's not rolling all the way and looking along that arm. It's not a complete side twist. Here we go. So I'm just going to go back at more a jaunty angle. So legs are straight. Hand is at the back of the head. It's as if you're standing. Pelvis stays absolutely still. Lift up and roll, and really try and get that elbow to go up. Look up to where the ceiling and the wall meet. Roll back down. So this should feel really quite different to the standing version. And you're targeting your muscles in a different way. We're working against gravity to lift up and to twist. So I feel a very strong stretch of twisting, like a braiding action almost, across from my hip, top of my hip and my waist, across to that shoulder, the opposite shoulder and elbow. There's no stretching across my shoulder blades because it's very different. So same movement essentially, feels completely different on the floor. I'm going to swap sides. Arm out to the side, hand at the back of the head. Make sure you've got that 90 degree angle. So rolling across the shoulder but up at the same time. Try not to let that same side hip go with you, even a little bit. Glue your hips. In fact, actually push that hip down a little bit, like when we did the bow and arrow. Lifting up and lowering. Lifting and lowering. 2 more. Wonderful. And coming over onto your side. Coming down onto your tummy. So, starting with repeating one of the exercises we did when we were standing. Elbows underneath the shoulders, hands opposite your elbows. Just lifting and lowering the chest to start with. So lifting and lowering the rib cage, keeping the head on top of the shoulders sort of thing. So not allowing the head to drop down each time or at any stage. Keep the head, the back of the neck long, And this again will help, this amount of movement will help with those shoulder rolls in the future. So you might be feeling a little bit uncomfortable in the lower back as you're doing this. So let's really set this up well. So stay lifted up as much as you can. Now lift your pelvic floor, switch those sit bones on a little bit, push your pubic bone into the mat. Support that lower back so that it doesn't feel uncomfortable. And then the movement that we're going to do here, it's hardly any movement actually, but the exercise that we're going to repeat is our chest pops. But again, very, very different because the hips are fixed. We're basically already in that upper back extension, but try and go a little bit more. So you're trying to fold over that bra strap line. You're trying to crease there. You're trying to bring your chest forwards between your arms. And I'm actually pulling my elbows back on the mat a little bit. And maybe just pulsing a little bit, relaxing a tiny bit in between, not too much, so it's not a great big collapse, but pulling through. And then for the last one, hold it there. Keep the back of the neck long, push the pubic bone down, lift the pelvic floor, keep that lower back supported. Well done. And relaxing down. Wonderful. One last thing. I think that's all of the exercises that we're repeating, but just one last thing to just to switch on that core one more time. So, and it is relevant to the repeating stuff that we did when we were standing. So when you're bracing, you're lifting your pelvic floor, you're connecting your rib cage to your hips, you're keeping everything in its natural curve. So we're going to do that in this position. So bring your hands together, your elbows are underneath your shoulders, knees are pushing into the floor. You're going to lift your belly button away from the floor and then lift up onto your knees. So you're on your knees and your elbows into your just neutral spine. So holding that there. So strong work. Lift the pelvic floor, draw the belly button back towards the spine. Keep the shoulder blades slid down in your back towards your hips. Keep the chin tucked in, the back of the neck long, and then lower and relax. You might want to stay there. You might want to join me in a bit more of a challenge. So if you can, so if you're going to stay at that level, just do it two or three more times. So lifting the hips up. Now curl your toes under. So the easier version from here is to straighten one leg, release the knee back down. Straighten the other leg, release the knee. Straighten and release, straighten and release. The harder version, if you want to work harder, straighten both legs, tap one knee to the floor, straighten, tap the other knee to the floor, straighten. About 10 of these, maybe between 6 and 10. Good, lower both knees, relax down. One last set if you can and or you want to. If you've had enough, have a little break. But if you can, we're going to run with the legs. So instead of just straightening and then coming back, we're going to switch, 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 switch. And keep going. So there actually isn't any difference between those two exercises. This is just much harder. Hips stay nice and still. Connect the rib cage at the front to the hips. Tough work on the shoulders. Go with it if you can. Another 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hand. Now have a good collapse. Brilliant. Well done. Up on all fours. Whatever floats your boat as far as wiggling around goes. I always want to do some spine circles, getting that rib cage moving. I always want to curl my toes under, straighten my legs for a nice downward dog stretch, bending one knee at a time to really push one heel into the floor. If you have a different body part to me that you really want to stretch, feel free to just find it, go right to the very edge. It should be nice and warm. You might want to just take a sway from side to side. Or maybe tonight do a stretch that you've never done before, or you haven't done for a long time. Or maybe a stretch, so for me this is very uncomfortable, but I just suddenly thought, oh, I'll take my hands back and I'll lift my hips up. So getting an extra stretch on the quads and at the front of those hips where I know I'm really tight. Whew, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope to see you again.